I never imagined that one evening could change everything. I returned home after a long day at the construction site, exhausted but looking forward to dinner and a quiet evening with my wife, Lena. The smell of the city rain clung to my coat, and I was eager to kick off my shoes, pour a glass of wine, and hear about her day. But as soon as I opened the door, I knew something was wrong. The apartment was silent, too silent. No laughter, no sound of our cat Milo scurrying around. On the counter, I saw a photograph I didn't recognize. Lena holding a tiny baby boy with bright blue eyes. A folded note lay beside it. My hands trembled as I picked it up. "Mark, I'm sorry. He's here now. I couldn't wait any longer. Please understand. Love, Dad." The words blurred before my eyes. Dad? My father? Confusion, disbelief, and rage collided in my chest. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was reading. I sank into a chair, the photograph slipping from my fingers. Lena? Pregnant? And it wasn't mine, it was his. My father. I remembered the countless evenings discussing family, the dreams of grandchildren, and the pressure my father and stepmother had always placed on Lena and me. Now it made sense in the most horrifying way. The pressure had gone too far, crossing every line imaginable. I tried calling Lena. No answer. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I checked our messages, our accounts, anything that could give me a clue. Nothing. Every familiar corner of our home now seemed alien, every memory tainted. The apartment that once held our laughter felt like a cage of betrayal. I needed answers. I needed justice. Rage gave me purpose as I drove to my father's house, the city lights streaking past in a blur. When I arrived, the front door opened before I could knock, and there he was, my father, smiling as if nothing had happened. Behind him, Lena appeared, her expression conflicted, torn between fear and defiance. "Mark, I can explain," she started. Explain? Explain that my father had taken something that belonged only to me? That my family, the people I trusted most, had conspired against me? I barely heard her words. My father's calm demeanor only fueled the fire inside me. He had crossed a line that could never be forgiven. I left that house before I could do something I would regret. My mind was spinning, plotting, desperate for a way to reclaim control of a life that had been ripped from my hands. On the drive home, I thought of divorce, of cutting ties with both Lena and my father, of starting over in a place where neither of them could touch me. Back at my apartment, I packed a bag. I needed distance, clarity, a plan. I couldn't stay here, surrounded by the ghosts of what had been. Every photograph, every note, every trace of Lena's presence was a reminder of the betrayal. I sold our shared belongings online, emptied our home of memories, and changed my contact information. The past had to stay behind. In the days that followed, I barely slept. I drank more than I should have, walked through the city at night, and tried to drown the chaos in my mind. But then, in a quiet moment, at a small cafe, I met Rachel, a farm manager visiting the city. She noticed my distracted look, offered a gentle smile, and started a conversation. Her calm presence was a balm to the storm inside me. I found myself telling her fragments of my story, not all, but enough to show the cracks. She listened, never judging, never rushing, just steady. And in her eyes I saw a hint of possibility. Maybe life wasn't finished breaking me. Maybe, with someone like her, I could rebuild. Rachel offered me a job far from the city, on her family's farm in the countryside. At first, I hesitated. How could I leave everything behind when my life had been so violently disrupted? But the thought of quiet mornings, open fields, and the chance to work with my hands, it was tempting. More than that, it was survival. So I packed what little I had left, drove to the farm, and met Rachel's family, her father, Henry, and her sister, Emma. They welcomed me cautiously but warmly, recognizing the brokenness I carried. The farm was simple, the work demanding, but each day gave me focus. Each task, feeding animals, mending fences, repairing barns, was a step away from the betrayal, a step toward reclaiming myself. And in the evenings, when the work was done and the sun dipped behind the hills, Rachel and I would sit on the porch, talking, sharing stories, and slowly, carefully, building trust. For the first time since discovering Lena's betrayal, I felt a glimmer of hope, a spark that maybe life could be good again, even after it had been shattered so completely. But the past didn't let go easily. Every time I thought of my father or Lena, a storm of anger and sorrow would rise inside me. I knew I had to confront the truth eventually, to face the people who had destroyed the life I thought I had. Yet for now, on the farm, with Rachel's steady presence, I allowed myself to breathe, to think, to plan. The road ahead was uncertain, the wounds still raw, but one thing was clear. I would rebuild, piece by piece, day by day. And maybe, just maybe, I could learn to trust again. The farm was nothing like the city I had known. Rolling hills stretched under an endless sky, dotted with grazing sheep, and the occasional tractor rumbling in the distance. It smelled of earth and hay, clean and raw in a way that made my lungs ache with relief. For the first time in weeks, I felt my mind start to unclench, even if just a little. Rachel showed me around the property, pointing out the barns, the vegetable fields, and the small orchard behind the main house. Her father, Henry, was a tall man with a weathered face and kind eyes. He didn't ask too many questions about my past, just offered a firm handshake and a quiet, "Welcome." Her sister, Emma, was more curious, peppering me with light-hearted questions about city life, my skills, and how I had ended up here. I spent that first week learning the rhythm of farm life. Mornings began at dawn, feeding chickens, milking goats, and checking on the animals. Afternoons were for repairing fences, tending the crops, and helping wherever I was needed. My hands grew calloused, my body exhausted, but my mind felt clearer than it had in months. Each task was a meditation, a distraction from the memories that haunted me. Rachel often joined me for the work, her laughter a light that seemed to warm even the coldest corners of my thoughts. We talked about simple things, the best ways to prune the apple trees, how to keep the sheep from wandering, recipes for homemade bread. Yet beneath the ordinary conversations, I could feel her watching me, understanding me, without ever pushing. It was a trust I hadn't felt in a long time, and it scared me a little, because I wasn't sure I deserved it. One evening, after a long day repairing a broken fence, I found myself sitting on the porch of my small cabin, staring at the sunset. The sky was a riot of oranges and purples, and the wind carried the scent of wildflowers. Rachel joined me with 2 mugs of tea, handing me one without a word. I took a sip, the warmth spreading through me, and I realized how much I had been starving for normalcy, for simple moments like this. "Do you ever think about going back?" she asked quietly, her eyes on the horizon. I shook my head. "Back to the city? To Everything I had? No, I can't, not yet, not ever, maybe. My voice cracked slightly, and I looked away, ashamed of the tremor in my tone. She didn't push. Instead, she just sat beside me, her presence steady and calm. For the first time since discovering Lena's betrayal, I didn't feel alone. The days turned into weeks, and I started to notice small changes in myself. I laughed more, slept better, and even smiled without forcing it. The farm demanded attention, and I gave it fully, leaving little room for the spiraling thoughts that used to dominate me. Henry occasionally offered advice or complimented my work, and Emma's teasing grew more friendly than probing. And Rachel became a part of my routine, not just a comforting presence, but someone I wanted to impress, someone I cared about deeply. Yet the past was never far. I found myself thinking about Lena, about the child she carried, about my father. Anger would flare, memories would crash over me in waves, and I would have to step away, breathe, and remind myself that here I had control. Here I was building something real, something mine. One rainy afternoon, while mending the roof of the barn, I slipped and fell, twisting my ankle. Rachel rushed to my side, concern etched across her face. She helped me back to the cabin, cleaned the scrape on my forehead, and made me rest. She refused to leave until she was sure I could walk without limping too badly. It was in that moment, as I watched her kneel beside me in the soft light of the cabin, that I realized I had begun to care for her, not just as a friend, but as someone who had quietly anchored me through one of the darkest periods of my life. Later that night, I stayed awake thinking about the future. Could I trust someone again? Could I let someone in after the betrayal of Lena and my father? The answers weren't clear, but one thing was undeniable. I wanted to try. I wanted to live again, and perhaps with Rachel I could. But life on the farm wasn't only healing, it was also challenging. There were tasks I struggled with, disputes over chores, and moments when the weight of the past pressed too hard. Yet, every time I wanted to give up, Rachel and the family reminded me that resilience wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up again and again. And slowly, day by day, I began to understand that this new life, as hard as it was, might be exactly what I needed. A place where I could rebuild my trust, find love again, and eventually, perhaps, discover forgiveness, not for them, but for myself. The calm of the farm life couldn't erase the echoes of the past entirely. Every so often, a memory of Lena, my father, or the betrayal that had shattered my family would sneak into my mind like a shadow, threatening to darken the hard-won peace I was building. One evening, as I worked alone in the barn, sorting hay for the animals, my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. It was a photograph of Lena, heavily pregnant, standing in front of a hospital. No words, just the image. My chest tightened, anger and grief mixing into a bitter taste. I tossed the phone onto the bench, pacing the barn floor. How had she gone this far? And worse, how had my father been involved? My hands shook as I gripped the edge of the work table. Rachel found me there later, drawn by the sound of my voice, muttering curses to myself. I didn't want to share, not yet. Not while the storm of emotions was still raw. But her steady eyes, full of concern without intrusion, forced me to take a deep breath. I explained only that the past had found me, and I didn't know how to handle it. She nodded silently, her presence a comfort I didn't fully understand I needed. The next days were difficult. I returned to the farm tasks mechanically, going through the motions without letting myself feel too deeply. I avoided Rachel when I could, fearing that my anger would spill over and ruin what had started to feel like hope. But the family was patient. Henry, sensing my unrest, offered advice about forgiveness, not for the sake of those who hurt me, but for my own peace. Emma, ever observant, left me small notes in the cabin. Breathe. You're not alone. Then came the confrontation I had been dreading. Lena appeared on my doorstep one morning holding our daughter, Sophie, whose existence I had only learned through whispers and half-truths. She smiled, trying to play the part of the happy mother, but I saw through it. The fear, the guilt, the audacity of her actions. I barely recognized the woman I had once loved. You need to talk to her, Rachel said gently, standing beside me. Her support steadied me, gave me the courage to step forward. I opened the door. Lena's eyes widened in shock, realizing that I knew everything. I didn't speak at first, simply taking in the sight of my child, so small and unaware, and the woman who had betrayed me. What are you doing here? I finally asked, my voice calm but edged with danger. I wanted to explain, Lena stammered, her voice trembling. I didn't mean for— Don't, I interrupted. There's nothing to explain. You made choices. My father made choices. And now I have to live with them. Sophie, sensing the tension, whimpered and reached for me. Despite the pain, my heart clenched with an impossible love. I picked her up, holding her close. Lena's eyes filled with tears, but they did not move me. I could not forgive yet. Not the betrayal, not the deception, not the devastation wrought on my life. Rachel appeared beside me, wrapping her arm around my shoulder. You don't have to face this alone, she whispered. Her words were a lifeline, reminding me that the world could still hold love, still offer safety. In the weeks that followed, I set boundaries. Lena and my father would not interfere in Sophie's life, or mine, any longer. The legal battle for custody became inevitable, and I threw myself into preparing for it, using every ounce of strength I had learned to muster on the farm. I documented everything, gathered evidence, and leaned on Rachel's quiet support to keep me grounded. Despite the turbulence, life on the farm persisted. Mornings still brought the smell of hay and the lowing of cows, the simple chores keeping me tethered to reality. Even in the darkest moments, Rachel's presence reminded me that trust could exist again, that love could heal. But trust, once shattered, is slow to return. And every smile from Sophie, every glance from Rachel, carried the weight of what had been lost and what might still be regained. One evening, after a long day at the barn, I found myself sitting on the porch with Sophie asleep in my arms. Rachel handed me a cup of tea, sitting silently beside me. The sky blazed with the colors of sunset, and for the first time in months, I let myself feel a small spark of hope. The road ahead would be difficult, full of court dates, confrontations, and emotional scars. But I was no longer alone. I had my daughter, I had Rachel, and for the first time since the betrayal, I believed that I could begin to reclaim my life. As darkness fell over the farm, I made a silent vow. I would protect Sophie at all costs, confront the past when necessary, and never again let betrayal dictate the course of my future. And perhaps one day I could allow myself to love again, not blindly, not naively, but with eyes wide open, knowing that even in a world full of pain, there was still room for hope, for family, and for forgiveness. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal procedures, family confrontations, and sleepless nights. I had never imagined my life could become a courtroom drama, but there I was, preparing evidence, statements, and timelines to ensure Sophie's safety and secure her future. Lena and my father had retained a team of lawyers, confident that manipulation and past connections would give them the upper hand. But I had something stronger: truth, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to my daughter. Rachel never left my side. She accompanied me to consultations, helped me organize documents, and kept my spirits grounded when anger or despair threatened to consume me. I had never realized how much I needed someone to simply witness my pain, to stand beside me without judgment. Her presence was steady, calming, and strangely empowering. It reminded me that I could survive this storm without losing myself entirely. Sophie became my anchor. Even on the days when the battle seemed endless, a smile from her, a small hand in mine, reminded me why I had to fight. She had no part in the betrayal that had torn my life apart, and I owed it to her to shield her from the chaos. Each bedtime story, each gentle kiss on her forehead, was a promise that I would never abandon her, never let deceit dictate her reality. The court proceedings were tense. Lena tried to justify her actions, painting herself as a victim of circumstance, while my father remained silent, a grim acknowledgment of his misdeeds. When my turn came, I spoke with measured clarity, presenting evidence of deceit, emotional manipulation, and the dangerous environment they had created. I spoke not with anger, but with the quiet, unwavering authority of a father who had endured betrayal and refused to let it define his child's life. Days stretched into weeks. Every phone call from the lawyer, every update from the court clerk, carried weight. Rachel held my hand through it all, never letting me feel alone. And then, one afternoon, the call came. The judge had ruled in my favor. Sophie would remain in my custody, and Lena and my father would have strictly supervised visitation rights, only if deemed safe. Relief washed over me like a tide breaking on the shore. For the first time in months, I could breathe. That evening, I carried Sophie to the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Rachel sat beside me, her hand on my shoulder, a comforting weight that grounded me. Sophie's laughter echoed in the twilight, a sound that erased some of the lingering bitterness, if only for a moment. "This is only the beginning," Rachel said softly. "But you've won the most important battle." I nodded, holding Sophie closer. The past could not be erased, but it could be contained. Boundaries had been set, justice had been served, and now the future was ours to shape. I realized that family wasn't defined solely by blood. It was also defined by those who stood beside you when the world tried to tear you apart. In the following months, life gradually settled into a rhythm I had almost forgotten existed. Sophie thrived in her new environment, her laughter and curiosity filling the corners of our home. I continued to work on the farm, finding solace in the simplicity of daily routines, the tangible results of labor, and the quiet beauty of the countryside. Rachel and I grew closer, our bond deepening with shared responsibility and mutual understanding. One evening, as we watched Sophie play with the animals, I finally allowed myself to speak aloud the thoughts I had kept buried for so long. "I can't believe we made it through this," I said, my voice soft, almost in awe. Rachel smiled, her eyes reflecting the warm glow of the setting sun. "You didn't just survive," she said. "You built something stronger. You protected your daughter, and you allowed yourself to find love again." I looked at Sophie, chasing a lamb through the field, her laughter pure and untainted. In that moment, I understood the full weight of my choices, the pain of betrayal, the struggle for justice, and the effort to rebuild a life that had been nearly destroyed. It wasn't easy, and the scars would remain, but they no longer dictated the course of my days. The farm, the routines, the people who stood with me, they were my sanctuary. Lena and my father would never be able to take that away. And though the memory of their betrayal would linger, it served as a reminder of what I had overcome and what I had built in spite of it. As night fell, I tucked Sophie into bed, kissed her forehead, and whispered a promise. No matter what the world threw at us, I would be there, always. And for the first time in years, I felt the possibility of peace, of family, and of love that was untainted by lies. In the quiet of the night, with the farm sleeping around us, I allowed myself a small smile. Life had tested me, broken me, and tried to steal everything I held dear. Yet here I was, standing, not defeated, but renewed. With Sophie in my arms and Rachel beside me, I knew we could face anything. Our family, rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal, was finally whole. Months passed, and the quiet rhythm of our new life became a source of comfort. The farm was no longer just a place to escape. It was a home filled with purpose, laughter, and healing. Sophie thrived, her curiosity and energy a constant reminder of why I had fought so hard. She learned the names of the animals, helped with feeding, and even began assisting in small chores, proud to contribute to our daily routine. Rachel and I continued to grow closer. Our relationship had formed under extraordinary circumstances, but it had developed into a genuine bond of trust, respect, and shared understanding. She was not just a companion. She had become my anchor, helping me navigate the lingering shadows of betrayal, while showing me that love could still exist in my life. Our evenings were often spent quietly on the porch, watching the sunset, sharing thoughts and dreams, and occasionally laughing at Sophie's playful antics. The legal restrictions on Lena and my father were enforced strictly. They could only see Sophie under supervision, and the visits were brief and structured. It was painful to enforce boundaries with my own family, but I knew it was necessary to protect Sophie and to maintain the stability we had fought so hard to achieve. Over time, even Sophie learned the meaning of these boundaries, understanding that the people who had hurt her father were no longer allowed to influence her life. I also began rebuilding relationships that had been strained by the betrayal and secrecy. Friends who had distanced themselves slowly returned, witnessing the changes in my life and respecting the decisions I had made. Trust had to be rebuilt cautiously, and I learned to value the loyalty of those who had stood by me through the darkest moments. Each connection felt more meaningful because it was chosen, not expected. Work on the farm became more than a job. It was therapy. The physical labor, the satisfaction of tangible results, and the routine gave me a sense of control I had not felt in years. I found peace in tending the fields, caring for the animals, and watching the cycles of growth and life. Each day offered a reminder that life moved forward, even after betrayal, and that we had the power to cultivate a future of our own making. Sophie's growth became a source of hope. Her laughter, her curiosity, her love for life, it reminded me that even in the face of profound betrayal, the next generation could thrive. I shared stories of resilience with her, teaching her about honesty, integrity, and the importance of standing up, for what is right. I wanted her to know that love and family were not just about blood. They were about care, respect, and shared experiences. Rachel's support was unwavering. She helped me navigate the delicate balance of parenting and healing, offering advice, companionship, and encouragement. Our relationship deepened not just through shared experiences, but through the quiet moments of understanding, the glances, the small gestures, and the knowledge that we were building a life together, founded on trust and mutual respect. One evening, after Sophie had gone to bed, Rachel and I sat by the fire pit, the flames casting a warm glow over our faces. "You've come a long way," Rachel said softly. "The past tried to take everything from you, but you're still standing." I nodded, staring into the fire. It tried, but I refused to let it define us. Sophie has a chance at a better life, and I'm finally learning that I deserve happiness too. We held hands, the silence filled with understanding. There was no rush, no pressure, just the quiet certainty that we were moving forward together, stronger than the pain that had once threatened to consume us. As months turned into years, our lives continued to stabilize. Sophie excelled in school, built friendships, and grew into a thoughtful, resilient young girl. Rachel and I continued to nurture our bond, finding joy in everyday routines and in the small milestones that marked our recovery. We celebrated birthdays, holidays, and ordinary days with a sense of gratitude that had been absent for far too long. The farm became a symbol of renewal, a place where trust, love, and family could grow untainted by past mistakes. Each sunrise brought with it the reminder that the future was ours to shape, and each sunset carried the peace of knowing that we had survived the worst and had emerged stronger. Evenings were our favorite time. Sitting on the porch with Sophie asleep inside and the gentle hum of the farm around us, Rachel and I would talk about dreams, plans, and the future we wanted to create. We spoke of travel, possibilities, and the life we hoped Sophie would lead, one of honesty, love, and resilience. Through it all, I learned that true strength comes not from avoiding pain, but from facing it head-on and refusing to let it define you. Our family had been tested, shattered almost beyond repair, but we had rebuilt it from the ground up. And in that reconstruction, we had found something even more profound than what we had lost: a deeper understanding of love, loyalty, and the power of chosen family. Time moved steadily, and the farm became a sanctuary not just for Sophie and me, but for Rachel as well. Her presence had grown into an irreplaceable part of our daily life. We worked side by side, laughed together, and supported each other through the small struggles that life inevitably brought. The farm wasn't just a place to live. It had become a home built on trust, hard work, and the lessons of past pain. Sophie's personality blossomed. Her resilience was remarkable, and her love for life was infectious. She approached each day with curiosity, helping with the animals, planting vegetables, and sometimes just sitting quietly under the shade of an old oak tree with a book. Watching her grow, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment and hope. This child, born from a turbulent past, had become the center of a future I was determined to protect. Rachel and I grew closer as co-parents. She helped guide Sophie gently, offering advice on school, friendships, and manners, while I handled the discipline and structure. Our approach was balanced, one of understanding, one of accountability. The harmony we achieved reflected the trust and respect that had developed between us. a stark contrast to the chaos that had once dominated my life. The memories of betrayal were still present, but they no longer controlled me. I had learned to set boundaries with my father and Lena, ensuring that Sophie would never be exposed to the toxicity of their choices. Our visits were limited and carefully monitored, but over time, even these brief interactions became easier to manage. I was no longer the broken man I had been. I had become a protector, a provider, and a parent who refused to let the past dictate the present. One afternoon, while repairing a section of the barn roof with Rachel, I found myself opening up about the lingering pain. "Sometimes I still feel anger," I admitted, wiping sweat from my brow. "It doesn't go away entirely, but it's no longer all-consuming." Rachel nodded, her hand brushing mine. "That's normal. You've been through more than anyone should have to endure. But look at what you've built. You've taken control of your life and created something beautiful." Her words resonated deeply. I realized that while the past could never be erased, it could be transformed into motivation, strength, and a lesson in resilience. Sophie, growing older, began asking questions about her family, about her mother, and about the father she had never known. I answered carefully, truthfully, but without burdening her with anger or resentment. It was important that she understood the past without being trapped by it. One evening, we received a letter from Lena's lawyer, requesting a meeting to discuss visitation rights. I approached the situation cautiously, consulting Rachel and legal counsel to ensure Sophie's safety and emotional well-being. The meeting was brief and tense, but I remained calm, asserting boundaries and insisting on supervised visits. It was a reminder that while life had stabilized, vigilance was necessary to protect what we had rebuilt. Meanwhile, Rachel and I began to explore long-term plans. We discussed expanding the farm, renovating the old barn, and even adopting a rescue dog to join our little family. These conversations were filled with excitement and hope, reflecting a life no longer dominated by past pain, but enriched by shared dreams. Sophie's school performance flourished. She excelled academically, participated in extracurricular activities, and formed meaningful friendships. Each report card and school achievement was a testament to the environment of stability, love, and encouragement we had created. I felt immense pride, knowing that the life Sophie was living was a far cry from the chaos that had once threatened to destroy our family. One weekend, Rachel and I decided to take Sophie to a nearby lake for a picnic. We spent the day swimming, playing, and watching the sunset. It was in these quiet, simple moments that I realized how far we had come. The trauma of betrayal had once seemed insurmountable, yet here we were, happy, united, and moving forward. Later that night, as Sophie slept peacefully, Rachel and I sat on the porch, reflecting. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" she asked softly. "All the time," I replied. "But I don't dwell on it anymore. The past shaped me, yes, but it doesn't define me. And it certainly won't define Sophie." We held each other in silence, comforted by the warmth of the night and the quiet hum of the farm. It was a life rebuilt, a family strengthened, and a future reclaimed. In the months that followed, Sophie's growth continued to amaze me. Her empathy, intelligence, and joy reminded me daily why I had fought so hard to protect her. Rachel and I strengthened our partnership, not just as co-parents, but as equals in building a life free from the shadows of deceit and betrayal. Through these experiences, I realized the true meaning of family. It wasn't simply defined by blood, but by love, commitment, and the willingness to fight for each other. We had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and loss. Yet we had emerged stronger, bound not just by circumstance, but by choice. As time passed, the stability Rachel and I had fought so hard to create became both a comfort and a challenge. Sophie was growing into a perceptive and sensitive young girl, and the questions about her past and family naturally increased. She was beginning to notice the absence of her biological father, and though I tried to shield her from the pain, I knew I could no longer delay the truth entirely. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the rolling hills of our farm, Sophie approached me, her small hands gripping mine tightly. "Dad, why don't I have a father like my friends?" she asked, her voice trembling. I knelt down, meeting her eyes with as much calm and honesty as I could muster. "Sophie, sometimes families are complicated, but you have me and Rachel and people who love you. That's what matters most." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. I held her close, understanding that this was just the beginning of her journey in processing the complicated truths of our lives. Around this time, news came that Lena had passed away suddenly. The unexpected loss reopened old wounds, and though a part of me felt relief that she would no longer interfere in our lives, grief for the family that could have been surfaced as well. Sophie, sensing my emotions, clung to me more tightly. Rachel offered quiet support, always knowing when to step in and when to let me guide Sophie through these difficult moments. With Lena gone, there were legal matters to resolve, including custody arrangements for the child she had had with my father. It was an uncomfortable and painful process. The courts required statements, DNA confirmation, and witness accounts. I faced my father in the courtroom, and though words were exchanged, there was no reconciliation, only the acknowledgement that our actions had irreversible consequences. Throughout this period, I relied on Rachel more than ever. She became my anchor, helping me navigate not only the legal hurdles but also the emotional labyrinth of betrayal, grief, and responsibility. She reminded me constantly that my duty was to Sophie and our future, not to the toxic past that had once engulfed us. Meanwhile, Sophie continued to thrive. School, friendships, and her growing sense of independence became bright spots in our life. She had started participating in local events on the farm, learning about animals, plants, and the rhythm of the seasons. Each accomplishment, no matter how small, felt like a victory against the shadow that Lena and my father had cast over our family. One quiet evening, Rachel and I sat together on the porch, watching Sophie chase fireflies in the fading light. "You know," Rachel said softly, "we've come so far, but the truth is the past isn't gone. It's still out there, and we have to be careful with what we reveal to Sophie." I nodded. I know, she deserves honesty, but she also deserves peace. I won't let her childhood be tainted by our mistakes. The days grew into months, and our life settled into a routine. Sophie thrived, Rachel and I grew closer, and the farm became a place of laughter, learning, and healing. However, reminders of betrayal occasionally surfaced, letters from lawyers, unexpected calls from distant relatives, or memories that appeared uninvited. Each time I had to remind myself of what truly mattered, the family I had built and the love that held us together. During this period, I also began documenting everything: journals, letters to Sophie for when she was older, and reflections on my experiences. I wanted to ensure that if the past ever tried to infiltrate our peace again, there would be a record of truth, love, and the choices that defined who we were as a family. One afternoon, as Rachel and I worked side by side repairing the old barn, I felt a sense of clarity. Life would never be perfect, and the wounds of betrayal would occasionally sting, but we were stronger because of them. Sophie's laughter echoed through the fields, a reminder that the future we were building was ours, untouched by the mistakes of others. As I looked at Rachel, her hair catching the sunlight, and Sophie running freely across the meadow, I realized something profound. Despite everything, I had found love, trust, and redemption. We were no longer defined by the betrayals of the past, but by the choices we made to protect, nurture, and love each other. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was life reclaimed, happiness earned, and a family forged through resilience and unwavering devotion. And in that moment, I understood that while the scars of betrayal would always remain, they would serve not as reminders of pain, but as symbols of the strength and love that had allowed us to rise above it. Life on the farm continued to evolve, bringing both challenges and quiet victories. Sophie's curiosity grew daily, and she became more engaged in the farm's daily activities, feeding animals, helping with crops, and learning the rhythms of rural life. Each small task she accomplished brought her confidence, and I found solace in watching her flourish. The innocence of her childhood became a sanctuary from the shadows cast by past betrayals. Rachel and I continued to strengthen our bond. She was not only my partner, but also my confidant, my anchor in the storm of unresolved family conflicts. Together, we navigated the delicate balance of providing Sophie with a sense of security, while protecting her from the chaos that had once upended our lives. Nights were often spent on the porch, sipping tea, sharing our fears, hopes, and dreams for the future. One day, while repairing a fence with Rachel, I noticed Sophie sitting under the old oak tree, sketching in her notebook. Her drawings told stories, some happy, some tinged with longing. I realized that even at her young age, she was processing the complexities of our family history. Approaching her gently, I asked, "What are you drawing, Sophie?" She looked up, her eyes serious but calm. "Just us. The farm. You, Mom, me. I like this place. It makes me feel safe." Her words hit me with unexpected force. Despite everything that had happened, my father's betrayal, Lena's manipulations, the legal battles, we had created a space where Sophie could feel safe, loved, and whole. It was proof that healing was not only possible but also enduring. As weeks turned into months, Rachel and I discussed long-term plans. The farm, with its rolling fields and quiet streams, had become more than a refuge. It was now our home, a foundation for a future untainted by past misdeeds. We began renovations, fixing the barn, painting the cottage, planting new trees, symbolic acts of reclaiming our lives and reinforcing the stability we so desperately needed. During this period, I made a conscious effort to maintain open communication with Sophie. I wanted her to understand that while the past held painful truths, it did not define our family. We celebrated milestones together. Her first successful harvest of vegetables, a school award, even the small triumphs of learning to ride a horse. Each moment reinforced the bonds that Lena and my father had tried to sever. One evening, while the three of us were enjoying a quiet dinner on the porch, I felt a sense of completeness I hadn't known in years. Sophie laughed at a story Rachel told about a mischievous goat, and the sound felt like music, a balm for wounds long thought too deep to heal. I realized that happiness didn't erase the past. It merely existed alongside it, a testament to resilience and love. As the seasons changed, I also began reconnecting with distant family members and friends who had been estranged during the turmoil. Carefully, I rebuilt bridges, maintaining honesty about past events while focusing on the present and the future. These connections were fragile at first, but over time, they strengthened, providing additional support for Sophie and Rachel. Amidst all this, I reflected on my father's actions and the consequences they had wrought. While anger and betrayal remained, I gradually replaced them with understanding, not of his morality, but of the fact that life's hardships sometimes reveal who we truly are. This perspective allowed me to move forward without being consumed by vengeance or resentment. One particularly bright morning, as Sophie ran through the fields chasing a kite, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Despite the hardships and betrayals, we had emerged stronger, united, and capable of genuine joy. Rachel joined me, slipping her hand into mine, and together we watched Sophie, knowing that the love we had cultivated was unbreakable. By the end of the year, our farm had become a sanctuary, not just for us, but for anyone seeking refuge from the storms of life. Friends visited, neighbors stopped by, and Sophie's laughter filled the air. We celebrated holidays and birthdays, marking each occasion with traditions that reminded us of our resilience and the power of family forged through adversity. The shadow of past betrayals had not disappeared entirely, but it no longer dictated our lives. Instead, it served as a reminder of how far we had come and the strength required to protect those we love. I understood, perhaps for the first time, that true healing was not forgetting, but living fully in spite of the scars. And in that understanding, I found peace. The farm, our family, and the life Rachel and I were building together became a testament to endurance, trust, and the enduring power of love. Sophie thrived. Rachel and I grew closer, and the memories of betrayal slowly transformed into lessons of strength, shaping a future that, despite its painful beginnings, promised hope, happiness, and a love that could withstand anything. The following spring, our life on the farm blossomed in ways I had once thought impossible. Sophie had grown more independent, exploring the fields and meadows with a sense of curiosity that warmed my heart. Each day I watched her transform from a cautious, quiet girl into a confident, joyful child, her laughter echoing across the land like a promise of renewal. Rachel and I had deepened our relationship, building a partnership based on trust, understanding, and shared responsibility. We navigated the complexities of parenting together, discussing every decision, every small concern, ensuring that Sophie felt loved and secure. Our nights often ended in long conversations on the porch, under the stars, reflecting on how far we had come and what we still hoped to achieve. One afternoon, while repairing a section of the barn roof, I paused and looked over the fields. The crops swayed gently in the breeze, the animals grazed contentedly, and the sun bathed everything in a warm, golden light. For the first time in years, I felt a profound sense of peace. It was not the absence of pain or betrayal, but the presence of healing, resilience, and love that made life feel whole again. Sophie approached me, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. "For you, Dad," she said, smiling shyly. I knelt to accept them, feeling tears prick my eyes. "Thank you, sweetheart. These are perfect." She beamed, clearly proud of her gift. That simple exchange, so ordinary yet so meaningful, reminded me of the importance of presence and attention in nurturing love. As the months passed, Rachel and I began to make more long-term plans. We discussed expanding the farm, introducing new crops, and even considering a small guest house for visitors. These ideas were not just practical. They were symbolic of our commitment to creating a future free from the shadows of the past. Sophie's room was redecorated with bright colors, her artwork displayed proudly on the walls, a daily affirmation of her creativity and vitality. Despite the joy that had grown around us, I never forgot the lessons of betrayal and loss. My father's actions, Lena's deception, they were wounds that had shaped me, teaching me the value of honesty, communication, and vigilance in relationships. I made a conscious effort to impart these lessons to Sophie, guiding her gently toward understanding the complexities of human behavior, while ensuring she felt safe, protected, and cherished. One evening, Rachel suggested we host a small gathering with friends from nearby farms and the community. I was hesitant at first, wary of exposing our private life, but the warmth and camaraderie that followed reassured me. Sophie played with other children, laughing and running freely, while Rachel and I connected with neighbors over shared experiences. It was a reminder that community, like family, could be a source of healing and strength. As the year progressed, I noticed subtle changes in Sophie. She asked questions about our past, not out of curiosity alone, but from a desire to understand her place in the family and the history that had brought us together. I answered carefully, sharing stories of challenges, resilience, and the love that had sustained us. I wanted her to know that while betrayal and pain existed, they did not define our family or our future. Rachel and I also took steps to secure our farm legally and financially, ensuring that Sophie's future would be protected. We established a trust fund and organized all paperwork for the property, creating stability that no unforeseen events could easily disrupt. These measures, though practical, were also symbolic, a testament to the care and planning that went into rebuilding our lives. One quiet morning, as Sophie sat painting by the window, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. From heartbreak, betrayal, and shattered trust, we had forged a family rooted in love, respect, and perseverance. I realized that the pain of the past had given way to something stronger, the ability to create a life grounded in hope, guided by the lessons we had learned, and sustained by the bonds we had nurtured. In the end, it was the ordinary moments, the laughter, the shared meals, the quiet talks under the stars, that truly defined our recovery. Rachel and I held each other close, watching Sophie sleep peacefully, knowing that despite everything, we had rebuilt not only a home, but also a sense of safety, trust, and enduring love. Our story was no longer one of betrayal and destruction. It had transformed into a story of resilience, growth, and the power of family. Each day was an affirmation that love, patience, and unwavering commitment could heal wounds thought irreparable. And in that realization, I found a peace I had once believed was lost forever. The farm, once a refuge, had become our sanctuary, a place where Sophie could thrive, where Rachel and I could nurture our bond, and where the shadows of the past were softened by the light of hope and the promise of a better tomorrow. As summer approached, our farm thrived in ways that mirrored our family's emotional growth. Crops flourished under careful tending, the animals grew healthy and strong, and our home resonated with laughter, warmth, and love. Sophie had blossomed into a confident and compassionate girl, her joy infectious, her curiosity insatiable. Watching her play in the fields, I felt an overwhelming gratitude for the second chance at family life that had been granted to us. Rachel and I had settled into a rhythm that balanced work, parenting, and personal connection. We shared responsibilities, celebrated small victories, and faced challenges as a united front. Nights often found us on the porch, hands intertwined, gazing at the stars while recounting memories, planning for the future, or simply enjoying the quiet comfort of each other's presence. One evening, Sophie tugged at my sleeve, holding a drawing she had made. It depicted our family, Rachel, myself, and Sophie, surrounded by the animals and fields of the farm, bathed in sunlight. "This is us, Dad," she said proudly. I hugged her tightly, my heart swelling. That simple drawing was more than art. It was a symbol of love regained, of a family healed from the fractures of the past. We had also taken steps to ensure stability and security for Sophie's future. We organized financial matters, reinforced the farm's infrastructure, and established clear plans for education and well-being. Every decision was guided by the lessons learned from betrayal, loss, and hardship. Lessons that had instilled in us the importance of honesty, commitment, and foresight. Despite the peace and happiness surrounding us, the memories of pain lingered, not as a weight, but as a reminder of resilience. I never forgot the mistakes of my father, the deception that once tore our family apart, or the heartache that followed. Instead, these memories became lessons, shaping how I nurtured my family, approached relationships, and protected those I loved most. The arrival of new friends and neighbors brought additional joy and connection. Community gatherings, shared meals, and cooperative work on the farm created bonds that reinforced our sense of belonging and trust. Sophie made friends easily, laughing and playing without the fear or suspicion that had once shadowed our lives. One quiet morning, I took a walk along the edge of the property, breathing in the crisp air, listening to the gentle rustle of the trees, and watching the sunlight dance across the fields. In that moment, I felt the culmination of all that had transpired: heartbreak, transformed into hope, betrayal into understanding, and loss into love. Life had granted us a second chance, and we had embraced it fully. Rachel joined me, placing her hand in mine. We stood together in silence, letting the serenity of the farm and the happiness of our family wash over us. Sophie's laughter rang from the distance, a melody of innocence and joy, and I knew, without a doubt, that our family had been rebuilt stronger than ever. We celebrated milestones with heartfelt ceremonies and quiet acknowledgments, appreciating the small victories that life offered. Birthdays, harvests, and simple dinners became moments of connection, reminding us of the fragility and beauty of life. Each day reaffirmed our commitment to each other and to Sophie, who had become the living symbol of love restored. As the sun set one evening, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, I reflected on our journey. From betrayal and devastation to forgiveness and renewal, our family had endured, and we had emerged resilient. I felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that we had built a foundation of trust, love, and mutual respect that would carry us through any future challenges. Our story was no longer defined by pain or betrayal, but by the power of love, perseverance, and unwavering dedication. Every moment spent together, every shared smile, and every challenge overcome reinforced the truth that family, truly, deeply, and unconditionally, was worth fighting for. In the quiet of that evening, as the farm settled into night, Rachel and Sophie joined me on the porch. We watched the stars emerge, one by one, each shining with its own light. And in that moment I realized that despite everything we had endured, we had created something enduring. A family united, a life restored, and a future filled with hope, joy, and love that would never be broken again. The past had shaped us, but it no longer controlled us. Together, we had reclaimed our lives, our happiness, and our family. And that was the greatest triumph of all.